The sun blazed high above the Miami coastline, painting the sky in hues of gold and sapphire. The yacht glided across the glittering waves, a floating palace of polished wood and chrome. Laughter drifted through the air, mingling with the clink of champagne glasses and the hum of gossip. It should have been a celebration of love, wealth, and friendship. Instead, it became the stage for the most brutal betrayal imaginable. Isabella Carter, 7 months pregnant, leaned on the railing with one hand resting protectively over her swollen belly. Her silk dress fluttered in the sea breeze, the delicate fabric doing little to shield her from the coldness that had begun to seep into her heart. She caught sight of her husband, Adrian Cole, across the deck. He was handsome, charming, the man she once believed would protect her forever. But now his hand wasn't holding hers. It was gripping the waist of her best friend, Sophia Lane. The crowd gasped as Adrian pulled Sophia close, their lips locking in a kiss bold enough to silence even the most seasoned socialites on board. Cameras clicked, murmurs spread like wildfire. Isabella's chest tightened, her breath caught between rage and disbelief. She stumbled forward, clutching her stomach. "Adrian, what are you doing?" she cried, her voice breaking under the weight of betrayal. Adrian turned toward her, his smile icy, his eyes void of love. "Stop pretending you matter, Isabella," he sneered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Sophia giggled beside him, her laughter sharp as shattered glass. "You were just in the way," Sophia added, her tone dripping with venom. The guests stood frozen, unsure if this was some twisted performance or a real-life scandal unraveling before their eyes. Some pulled out phones, recording every second, their whispers slicing the air. Isabella's vision blurred with tears, but she steadied herself. "I trusted you both," she whispered, her voice trembling, carried away by the sea breeze. Adrian's grip tightened on Sophia's hand as he stepped closer. "That trust was worth $2 billion, he said coldly. Then, with a sudden shove, he pressed both hands against Isabella's chest. Her scream tore through the midday sun as her body lurched backward. Gasps erupted. Glasses shattered against the deck as onlookers cried out in shock. The last thing Isabella saw before plunging into the churning water was Adrian's face. Calm, calculated, with Sophia's laughter echoing behind him. The waves swallowed her whole. Salt burned her throat, panic surged through her veins, and her hands instinctively shielded her unborn child. Above, the party resumed in cruel whispers, the sound of Adrian and Sophia's laughter drifting over the rail. And just like that, Isabella Carter, the wife, the friend, the mother-to-be, vanished beneath the waves, betrayed in broad daylight as the world watched in stunned silence. But fate had not written her final chapter yet. The ocean swallowed Isabella whole, dragging her beneath its violent surface. Salt stung her eyes, filled her lungs, and the weight of her swollen belly pulled her deeper into the abyss. Panic exploded in her chest. Her mind screamed for air, but louder than that was a single desperate thought. My baby must live. She kicked frantically, her arms thrashing against the relentless tide. The muffled roar of the yacht's engines faded above her, replaced by the deafening silence of water closing in from all sides. Images of Adrian's cold face and Sophia's cruel laugh replayed in her mind, burning hotter than the salt in her throat. Betrayal had pushed her overboard, but motherhood ignited a fire that refused to let her drown. Breaking the surface for one fleeting gasp, Isabella coughed seawater, her cries lost in the vast expanse. The yacht sailed on without slowing. No one threw her a rope. No hand reached out in mercy. The guests who had witnessed her fall turned away, fearful of crossing Adrian Cole, the man with power, money, and a heart carved from ice. The waves battered her from all sides, each one threatening to pull her under again. Her arms ached, her legs screamed for rest, but she refused to surrender. One hand pressed against her stomach as if to shield the fragile life within. "Hold on, baby," she whispered through chattering teeth. "Mama won't leave you." Minutes stretched into eternity. Clouds thickened overhead, darkening the once bright sky. The sea churned, and Isabella felt her strength slipping. Her silk dress tangled around her legs, dragging her down like chains. She tore at the fabric, her nails ripping the expensive threads, fighting to stay afloat. For every inch she rose, the ocean dragged her 2 inches deeper. Just when despair threatened to close in, a flicker of light appeared on the horizon, a small fishing boat cutting through the waves. Her vision blurred, but she forced her arms to flail, desperate for them to see. "Help," she screamed, though the ocean devoured her voice. The boat didn't turn. Not yet. Her body trembled, exhaustion seeping into her bones. Thoughts of her unborn child kept her alive, but her strength was vanishing. She prayed silently, tears mixing with seawater. If she was meant to die, let the child live. If fate still had mercy, let someone see her. Then a sharp whistle pierced the wind. A man shouted in Spanish from the deck of the fishing boat. "Over there? Una mujer." The vessel swerved, engines groaning against the current. A net dropped into the water, brushing her arm. She latched on with the last of her strength, her fingers bleeding as she clung. Strong hands reached down, hauling her onto the wooden deck. Isabella collapsed, coughing seawater, her body shaking violently. Rough voices surrounded her, warm blankets covered her soaked frame, and someone pressed a hand gently over her stomach. "She's pregnant," a fisherman exclaimed, eyes wide. The world spun around her, but one truth anchored her soul. She and her baby were still alive. And survival was only the beginning. The rocking of the small fishing boat lulled Isabella into a haze of exhaustion. Salt crusted her lips, her skin raw from the sea's punishment. Every muscle ached, but her trembling hand never left her belly. She listened for the faintest kick, the fragile sign of life within her. When it came, a tiny flutter beneath her palm, tears spilled down her cheeks. Her baby had survived the fall, the waves, the darkness. That was enough to keep her heart beating. The fishermen crowded around, their weathered faces etched with concern. "Señora, you need a hospital," one urged, his voice urgent. Another draped a blanket tighter around her shoulders. She shook her head, gasping, "No hospital, no police, no names." Their confusion was evident, but Isabella's eyes blazed with a desperation they couldn't ignore. She knew the truth. Adrian believed she was gone. Sophia would be celebrating, basking in her stolen role as his partner in crime. If they learned she was alive, they wouldn't hesitate to try again. Adrian's cruelty had no limits, and now that billions were at stake, neither did his ambition. Her survival had to remain the ocean's secret. As the boat pulled into a quiet dock on the outskirts of Miami, Isabella's decision solidified. The city lights shimmered in the distance, mocking reminders of the world she once belonged to. That world had cast her aside, watched her fall, and turned its back when she cried for help. She could never return as the same woman. Not yet. The fishermen offered her food, water, and clean clothes from their wives. Their kindness warmed her more than the blankets, but Isabella knew she couldn't stay. Each passing hour was dangerous. Adrian's reach stretched far, and rumors spread faster than wildfire. One wrong word, one curious stranger, and her secret would be lost. So she lied. With trembling lips and a steady gaze, she told them her name was Ana Morales. She was a traveler, caught in a storm, nothing more. The men accepted her story, though their eyes lingered with unasked questions. Before dawn, Isabella slipped away, leaving behind only gratitude and the faint outline of her fragile body in their borrowed clothes. She wandered the empty streets of Miami until she found refuge in a rundown motel, its neon sign buzzing weakly against the night. The room smelled of mildew and cigarettes, but it was safe. For the first time since the yacht, she allowed herself to collapse onto the bed, clutching her belly. Her reflection in the cracked mirror startled her. Wet hair clung to her face, eyes swollen from salt and tears, lips pale and trembling. She looked like a ghost, but beneath the exhaustion was a glimmer of fire. The woman staring back was not the same Isabella who had boarded that yacht. That woman was dead, pushed into the sea by betrayal. This new Isabella would rise from the wreckage. She would protect her child. She would reclaim what was stolen. And when the time came, Adrian and Sophia would regret underestimating her. Because she would return stronger than they ever imagined. Days blurred into nights inside the dim motel room. The buzzing neon outside her window cast restless red streaks across the peeling wallpaper, a constant reminder that she no longer belonged to the glittering world of yachts and champagne. Isabella Carter, the wife, the heiress, the woman draped in silk, was gone. In her place was a shadow, hiding under an assumed name, with nothing but the fragile kicks of her unborn child to remind her she was still alive. Her pregnancy had reached its heaviest stage. 7 months had turned into 8, and every step was an effort. She shuffled between the tiny bathroom and the creaking bed, her hands always pressed to her swollen stomach. Fear was a steady drumbeat in her chest. What if Adrian discovered she was alive? What if Sophia found her? What if her baby came too early, and no one was there to help? At night, she would cradle her belly and whisper promises to the life inside her. "I'll protect you," she murmured. "You'll never know their cruelty. You'll never feel their betrayal. You will only know love." The baby kicked in response, a steady thump that felt like hope against her ribs. Money was scarce. She sold her jewelry piece by piece at pawn shops where no one asked questions. The diamond bracelet Adrian once slipped onto her wrist fetched enough for groceries and prenatal vitamins. The sapphire earrings Sophia had admired at dinner parties became cash for doctor's appointments at a low-cost clinic across town. Each item sold was a reminder of what she had lost, but also what she was gaining: independence. The clinic smelled of disinfectant and faint despair. Women sat in plastic chairs, clutching paperwork, each carrying burdens of their own. Isabella kept her head down, using the name Ana Morales. When the doctor asked if the father would be attending appointments, she simply said, "No." The pitying looks cut deeper than scalpels, but she endured them. Better pity than danger. As her due date crept closer, Isabella's anxiety sharpened. She practiced breathing exercises from worn pamphlets, her hands shaking as she followed the diagrams. She packed a small bag, a baby blanket she bought secondhand, a plain dress for herself, and a single photograph of her mother tucked inside the pocket. That photograph was her talisman, proof that resilience ran in her blood. Loneliness clawed at her, but beneath it pulsed a growing strength. Every night, as contractions teased her body and exhaustion threatened to break her, Isabella felt something new hardening inside her chest. Resolve. She would not return to Adrian's world as a victim. She would return as a storm. But first, she had to survive childbirth alone. The neon outside flickered as thunder rolled across the horizon. Isabella placed her packed bag near the door, her heart steady, her body trembling. Soon, she would bring life into a world that had tried to bury her, and with that life, she would begin her war. The storm rolled in like a vengeful spirit, pounding rain against the cracked motel window and rattling the thin walls as if they might collapse. Lightning split the sky, illuminating Isabella's face, pale with pain. She clutched her swollen belly, her breath sharp, uneven. The contractions had started hours ago, subtle at first, then fierce, clawing through her body with the relentless rhythm of the sea that had once tried to claim her. She tried to steady herself on the nightstand, but her knees buckled. A scream tore from her throat, drowned instantly by thunder. Sweat drenched her skin, her hair plastered to her forehead. Every wave of pain felt like her body breaking apart, but she refused to collapse. She whispered through gritted teeth, "Hold on, baby, just a little longer. We'll make it." The hospital was miles away. Her phone lay silent on the bed. She hadn't dared call an ambulance. What if her name appeared in records? What if Adrian traced her? To the world, Isabella Carter was dead. She had to stay that way. She was alone, utterly, terrifyingly alone. Another contraction ripped through her, forcing her onto the floor. She crawled, inch by inch, dragging herself toward the motel bathroom. The cold tiles pressed against her palms as she braced herself against the sink. Her reflection in the mirror was unrecognizable, a woman wild with agony, eyes fierce with determination. She gritted her teeth and pushed. Minutes stretched into hours, time measured only by her cries and the storm's fury. The motel manager knocked once, alarmed by the noise, but when Isabella screamed at him to leave, he obeyed. This was her battle, hers alone. The world had abandoned her, but she would not abandon her child. Finally, as the clock neared midnight, the moment came. A final scream ripped from her chest, raw and primal. And then, silence, for a heartbeat. Her heart froze. Had she failed? Had the sea's curse followed her onto land? Then it came, a cry, fragile yet fierce, piercing the storm like a trumpet of survival. Her baby's first sound. Isabella collapsed back against the wall, tears streaming down her cheeks as she gathered the tiny, slippery bundle into her arms. "You're here," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You survived. We survived." The child's face was red, his fists clenched as though ready to fight the world already. She pressed him against her chest, letting him feel the rhythm of her heartbeat. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the two of them, a mother and son, reborn together in the heart of a storm. The pain faded into the background, replaced by a fierce protective love. Exhausted but unbroken, Isabella swaddled him in the second-hand blanket from her bag. She kissed his forehead, whispering a vow. "No one will ever hurt you, not your father, not her. As long as I breathe, you will be safe." Outside, the storm raged on, but inside that broken motel room, a new life had begun. While Isabella rocked her newborn in the dim glow of a motel lamp, the other side of Miami glittered with excess. The rooftop of a luxury high-rise pulsed with music, champagne fountains cascading under strings of golden lights. Adrian Cole, dressed in a tailored tuxedo, stood at the center of it all, Sophia Lane clinging to his arm in a diamond-studded gown. They were the picture of victory, a king and queen basking in wealth that wasn't theirs. "2 billion, Adrian toasted, his voice slick with triumph. "To new beginnings." Glasses clinked around him as powerful men and women cheered. No one dared mention Isabella's mysterious accident on the yacht. Whispers had circulated, of course, but money had a way of silencing inconvenient questions. Adrian had staged his grief perfectly, a short-lived performance that dissolved once the inheritance was secured. Now his smile was real, cruel and unrestrained. Sophia pressed her lips to his cheek, her laughter ringing like bells. "We did it, Adrian. The empire is ours." She twirled on the dance floor, basking in the stares of envy. For years she had lived in Isabella's shadow, the loyal best friend. Now she was flaunting her victory in designer heels, wearing jewels bought with blood money. Adrian leaned close, his voice low but laced with venom. She never stood a chance. Isabella was too soft, too naive. She thought love could protect her. He smirked, sipping his champagne. She was wrong. The party roared around them, executives, politicians, socialites, all eager to stay in Adrian's favor. Deals were struck in whispers, fortunes gambled in promises. To them, Adrian was untouchable, a man who had not only survived scandal but profited from it. Sophia, draped in luxury, played the role of devoted partner, her hand never leaving his. But even in triumph, cracks began to show. When Adrian's eyes lingered too long on another woman across the room, Sophia's smile faltered. When Sophia flaunted the diamond necklace he had gifted her, Adrian's jaw tightened at the reminder of how much he had spent. Their alliance was built on greed, not trust, and greed was a fragile glue. Meanwhile, across town, Isabella sat in silence, her baby boy nestled against her chest. She could still smell the storm in his hair, feel the rhythm of his tiny breaths. Every cry was a reminder of the life she fought for. Every kick of his little legs, proof that survival had meaning. She didn't need chandeliers or champagne. Her wealth was the warmth of her son's heartbeat, the promise of his future. But as she rocked him to sleep, her gaze hardened. Adrian and Sophia were celebrating too soon. They thought she was gone, erased by the sea. They thought $2 billion had bought them freedom. But Isabella was alive, and every lie they told, every toast they raised, was just fuel for her return. The empire they stole would one day burn in her hands. The motel room smelled faintly of baby powder and damp air. Isabella sat on the edge of the bed, rocking her son in her arms, whispering lullabies that barely rose above the hum of the broken air conditioner. She had grown thinner since the birth, her body frail, but her eyes burned with the fierce light of survival. Every knock on a distant door, every set of footsteps in the hallway, sent her heart racing. She lived in constant fear that Adrian's shadow might reach her. It was late afternoon when it came, a sharp knock on her door. Her breath froze. She clutched her baby tighter, pressing his tiny head against her chest. "Who is it?" she called, her voice trembling. "It's Alexander Grant," came the reply. The name struck her like lightning. The billionaire CEO whose face graced magazines, the man whispered about in boardrooms and charity galas. She had seen him once years ago, walking hand in hand with her late mother at a fundraising event. Back then, she had thought of him as a distant, untouchable figure. What was he doing here? Her instincts screamed for silence. But the knock came again, firmer this time. "Isabella, I know you're in there. Please, open the door. You're not safe here." Her knees buckled. How did he know her name? She pulled the blanket tighter around her baby and shuffled toward the door. Her reflection in the cracked mirror caught her eye. Disheveled hair, hollow cheeks, exhaustion carved into every line of her face. This wasn't the Isabella the world knew. This was a ghost, Slowly she unlocked the door. When it creaked open, she found him standing there, tall, broad-shouldered, his tailored suit out of place against the grime of the motel hallway. His eyes softened as they fell on her son. "You survived," he said quietly, almost in awe. "And so did he." Isabella's throat tightened. How do you know about us?" she demanded, clutching her baby closer. Alexander stepped inside, lowering his voice. "Your mother once asked me to protect you, should the world ever turn against you. I didn't think that day would come so soon. But when I heard whispers about the yacht, about Adrian's sudden fortune, I knew something was wrong." Her knees gave out and she sank onto the bed, tears streaming down her face. For the first time since the betrayal, she didn't feel invisible. Someone saw her. Someone believed her. Alexander pulled a chair close, his voice steady. "You can't fight him alone, Isabella. Adrian has money, power, and influence, but he doesn't have the truth. You do. And now you have me." The baby stirred, letting out a small cry. Alexander leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "Let me help you. For him, for you, for justice." Isabella looked down at her son, then back at Alexander. For the first time since the storm, hope flickered inside her. Maybe she wasn't as alone as she thought. The days that followed Alexander's arrival were unlike anything Isabella had imagined. He whisked her and the baby away from the decaying motel into a quiet townhouse on the edge of Manhattan. It wasn't one of his glass skyscrapers or lavish penthouses. It was discreet, hidden, the kind of place paparazzi never thought to look. For the first time since the yacht, Isabella slept without jerking awake to every sound, knowing her child was safe under a roof guarded by Alexander's private security. The townhouse was warm, lined with bookshelves and soft rugs. It smelled of cedar and lemon polish, a stark contrast to the mildew of the motel. Here, Isabella found space to breathe, to heal. Her body was still fragile from childbirth, but Alexander made sure doctors arrived quietly, under the guise of house calls. She resisted at first, ashamed of her weakness, but when she saw her baby cooing in the arms of a kind nurse, she allowed herself to accept the care. "You've been surviving," Alexander told her one evening as they sat by the fireplace, her son sleeping soundly in a bassinet nearby. "Now it's time to start living again." His words cut through the fog of fear. Isabella had been alive, yes, but like a shadow drifting from one day to the next. The thought of reclaiming her life felt impossible, yet the fire in Alexander's voice stirred something inside her. He introduced her to trusted allies, a discreet lawyer, a financial advisor, a woman skilled in digital forensics. They pieced together documents Adrian had forged, traced money he had funneled into offshore accounts, and uncovered proof of his betrayal. Isabella watched, silent at first, then with growing determination, as the puzzle of Adrian's empire unraveled before her eyes. But Alexander wasn't just preparing her for legal battles. He pushed her to reclaim herself. He insisted she walk outside in the mornings, holding her baby under the gentle sun. He encouraged her to eat properly, to dress in clothes that reminded her of her old self. One afternoon he surprised her with a sketchbook and pencils, remembering that she had once dreamed of launching her own fashion line. "Create again," he said. "Not for him, for you." Her hands trembled as she drew the first line, but soon the pages filled with designs. Bold, powerful, nothing like the delicate dresses Adrian once demanded she wear. Each sketch was a declaration. Isabella Carter was not gone. She was being reborn. At night, when her baby slept in the cradle beside her, Isabella stared at the city skyline from the townhouse window. Somewhere in that glittering maze, Adrian and Sophia were parading their stolen wealth, believing she was buried by the sea. They had no idea she was alive. They had no idea she was stronger, and they would never see her coming. The townhouse had become more than a refuge. It was now a war room. Each night, when the baby was asleep and the city lights shimmered beyond the curtains, Isabella sat at the oak dining table with Alexander and his small team of trusted allies. Stacks of files, flash drives, and encrypted laptops covered the surface like weapons. Every piece of paper, every line of code carried a fragment of Adrian's treachery. At first, Isabella could barely bring herself to look. Each photograph of her husband smiling beside Sophia twisted her stomach. Each bank statement felt like a dagger, proof of how long he had been plotting behind her back. But Alexander urged her on. "The truth will set you free," he told her, "and it will bury him." The revelations came slowly, piece by piece. Adrian had siphoned millions from her inheritance months before the yacht incident, disguising transfers through shell companies registered under Sophia's name. He had bribed accountants, blackmailed board members, and falsified contracts. The $2 billion he flaunted at parties wasn't earned, it was stolen, brick by brick, from the foundation Isabella's family had built for generations. One night, Alexander slid a document across the table. Isabella's hands trembled as she read it. A false death certificate bearing her name. Adrian had gone as far as declaring her legally dead. With that paper, he had secured full control of her estate. Her blood ran cold. "He killed me on paper before he tried to kill me in truth," she whispered. Her baby stirred in the next room, and Isabella's heart hardened. "He didn't just betray me, he betrayed our child." The team uncovered more. Photographs of Adrian and Sophia vacationing in the Bahamas while Isabella hid in a motel, receipts for lavish jewelry Sophia wore at galas, emails dripping with arrogance where Adrian bragged about his new empire to investors. He had rewritten history, painting Isabella as weak, unstable, a tragic accident swept away by the sea. With every discovery, Isabella's grief turned into fury. She no longer wept over the betrayal, she seethed. The woman who once begged for her husband's love was gone. In her place stood a mother, a fighter, a storm waiting to break. Alexander watched her carefully, offering quiet strength. "You have enough to destroy him," he said. "But timing is everything. Strike too soon, and he'll bury the evidence. Wait too long, and he'll tighten his grip." Isabella nodded, her eyes burning with resolve. She traced her fingers over the false death certificate, then tore it in half. The sound was sharp, final. "He thinks I'm dead," she said. "Let's make sure that's his biggest mistake." That night, as her baby slept peacefully, Isabella sketched her plans in silence. Her comeback wouldn't just expose Adrian, it would shatter the empire he had stolen brick by brick. The man who buried her on paper would be buried in reality. Weeks passed, and the fragile woman who had once hidden in the shadows of a rundown motel began to fade. Isabella Carter was stepping into something new, something unstoppable. The townhouse that had once been her sanctuary became her training ground. Every morning she rose before dawn, her baby resting safely under the watch of a trusted nanny Alexander had arranged. At first it was small steps, eating balanced meals instead of scraps from vending machines. Walking the quiet streets near the townhouse, the weight of her newborn nestled in a sling against her chest. Her body, once broken from childbirth and grief, began to strengthen. The fear that had clung to her shoulders slowly peeled away, layer by layer, replaced by something fiercer. Alexander encouraged her constantly. "You are not the victim of this story, Isabella," he told her one afternoon as they sat together in the garden. "You are the author." Those words echoed in her mind as she looked down at her baby, his eyes wide and curious, his tiny hand clutching her finger. She knew then that she couldn't just survive, she had to rise. For him. One day, Alexander returned with a wardrobe carefully chosen by his stylist. Gone were the faded jeans and shapeless sweaters she had used as camouflage. In their place were tailored suits, sleek dresses, and silk blouses in bold colors. The first time Isabella slipped into a crimson gown and saw herself in the mirror, she hardly recognized the woman staring back. Her shoulders were squared, her eyes sharp, her presence commanding. She looked like the heiress she was born to be, no longer a ghost but a storm cloaked in elegance. Her transformation wasn't just external, she sharpened her mind too. With Alexander's lawyers and advisors, she studied every detail of Adrian's empire. The forged contracts, the offshore accounts, the bribes hidden in coded language. Each discovery became a weapon in her arsenal. Late into the night, while her baby slept, she sketched in her notebook both fashion designs and battle plans, her pen slicing across the pages with precision. But the most profound change came from within. Isabella no longer trembled at the memory of Adrian's shove or Sophia's cruel laughter. Instead, she replayed those moments as fuel, each memory a reminder of why she could never falter. Pain had once drowned her, but now it forged her into steel. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the window, Isabella stood before the mirror again. She held her baby close, her eyes blazing with quiet fire. "They thought they killed me," she whispered, "but they created something far stronger." The woman in the reflection was not the betrayed wife, not the victim lost at sea. She was the storm that would destroy them. The townhouse was quiet at dawn, the city outside still wrapped in sleep. Isabella cradled her son against her chest, rocking slowly in a worn armchair. Alexander had moved into the nursery. The baby's small fingers curled around a lock of her hair, his breathing soft and steady. His innocence was a universe untouched by betrayal, a fragile light that had somehow survived the storm that nearly drowned them both. She studied his face, the curve of his cheeks, the tiny bow of his lips. He was everything Adrian had tried to erase, everything Sophia had dismissed as collateral damage. But here he was, alive and thriving. Each cry reminded her that life had not ended on that yacht, it had only begun. Motherhood was nothing like the gilded picture Adrian once painted for her. He had spoken of nannies, of grand nurseries, of heirs raised in marble halls. What Isabella held now was something far more powerful: raw, unfiltered love. There was no audience, no performance, no cameras. Just a mother and her child, surviving together. In the stillness, Isabella whispered promises into his tiny ear. "You will never know what he did to us. You will never be broken by greed. You will grow in truth, in love, in strength." Her voice trembled, but her resolve was iron. Every word was a vow, every vow a thread stitching together her fractured soul. The baby stirred, his eyes fluttering open. They were a deep brown, wide with curiosity, mirroring the innocence Adrian had long since lost. When his gaze met hers, Isabella felt something surge through her. Not weakness, not fear, but power. This child was her anchor, her compass, her shield. Alexander often found her like this, sitting in the nursery, her face illuminated by morning light. Once he said softly, "He's your legacy, Isabella. He's also your weapon. With him, you'll never falter." She had smiled faintly, though her eyes brimmed with tears. He was right. Her son wasn't just her child. He was the reason she had survived the sea, endured the loneliness, and embraced transformation. Without him, she might have let despair consume her. With him, she was unstoppable. Each day, as the baby grew stronger, so did Isabella's resolve. His first smile brought her laughter she thought she'd lost forever. His tiny grip on her finger reminded her of the strength already blooming in his fragile body. Every milestone, no matter how small, was a message. Life had chosen her. And she would honor it by reclaiming everything stolen from them. When she kissed his forehead, she wasn't just soothing him. She was sealing her promise to the future. Adrian had pushed her into the sea, hoping she and her child would vanish into oblivion. Instead, the child had become the very heart of her war. And Isabella knew with bone-deep certainty that she would win, for him, always for him. The night was heavy with anticipation. Isabella sat at the oak table, the glow of a laptop illuminating her determined face. Files were spread around her like a battlefield map: contracts, bank statements, hidden transfers, all the pieces of Adrian's corruption assembled in one devastating puzzle. Her baby slept soundly in the nursery upstairs, unaware that his mother was about to set fire to the empire built on betrayal. Alexander leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, his voice low. "Once you do this, there's no turning back. The world will know Adrian is a thief. Are you ready?" Isabella's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Her reflection glared back from the dark screen, not the broken woman Adrian had discarded, but the storm forged from pain and survival. "He buried me with lies," she said, steady and calm. "It's time the truth buries him." At the click of a button, encrypted files shot across cyberspace to journalists, watchdog groups, and financial regulators. Documents detailing forged signatures, offshore accounts, and bribery trails too elaborate to ignore. The email bore no name, just one line: "Justice begins now." The next morning, Manhattan awoke to chaos. Headlines blazed across every news outlet: "Coal Empire under fire," "Shocking allegations of fraud." Business channels buzzed with analysts dissecting the scandal, voices urgent and incredulous. Stock tickers screamed in red as Adrian's fortune began to tremble. At his penthouse, Adrian slammed the morning paper onto the marble counter, his face pale with rage. Sophia hovered nearby in a silk robe, her smirk faltering for the first time. This has to be a mistake," she stammered. "Maybe one of your rivals." "Don't be stupid," Adrian snapped, veins throbbing at his temple. "This is too precise. Someone has my files." He stalked across the room, gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles whitened. His lawyers, his accountants, even his allies in politics, none could give him reassurance. Every call ended the same: "This looks bad. Very bad." Sophia poured herself champagne with a trembling hand, trying to mask her nerves. "Who would dare come after you like this?" she whispered. Adrian's jaw clenched, his mind racing. For a fleeting second, a shadow of doubt flickered in his eyes. Could Isabella? No. He had seen her fall. He had declared her dead. And yet, the unease gnawed at him. Meanwhile, Isabella watched the storm she had unleashed from the quiet of the townhouse. Her lips curved into the faintest smile as she saw Adrian's face splashed across the news, his empire shaking under the weight of truth. It wasn't enough to destroy him, not yet. But it was the first crack in his fortress. She pressed a kiss to her baby's forehead. "That's for us," she whispered, "and it's only the beginning." The empire had trembled. Soon, it would collapse. The penthouse, once filled with champagne laughter and glittering guests, now reeked of tension. Newspapers lay scattered across the marble floor, each headline screaming the same story: fraud, corruption, collapse. Adrian paced like a caged predator, his tuxedo jacket discarded, his shirt clinging with sweat. Sophia sat on the velvet chaise, her diamond necklace glittering in the morning light, but her hands shook as she scrolled through her phone. "Half the board is jumping ship," Adrian growled, tossing his phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. "Regulators are sniffing around, and investors are panicking. Someone is feeding them inside information." Sophia tried to mask her fear with a smile. "It'll blow over. You always land on your feet." But her voice lacked conviction. For months, she had basked in the illusion of security, draped in stolen wealth and stolen love. Now the walls of their empire trembled, and she felt the cold draft of reality creeping in. Adrian's eyes narrowed. "You sound nervous?" "Shouldn't I be?" she snapped, her composure breaking. "Do you know how people are talking about me? They call me your whore in the tabloids. My name is plastered everywhere, dragged through your mess." Adrian's face twisted with contempt. "Don't forget your place, Sophia. You wanted this. You wanted me. And now you want to whine because it's messy?" The words stung more than she expected. For years, she had convinced herself she was more than Isabella's shadow, more than a fling in Adrian's bed. She had betrayed her best friend for this life, convinced she would be his queen. But as his empire faltered, she saw the truth. She was just another pawn. Later that evening, while Adrian stormed through phone calls with his lawyers, Sophia retreated to the balcony, clutching her champagne glass. The city stretched below her like a glittering temptation. In her inbox, she found a message from an anonymous sender. "We know what Adrian did. Help us and save yourself." Attached were files, evidence linking Adrian directly to fraud and attempted murder. Her pulse quickened. She should delete it, run to Adrian, show him. But instead she stared at the glowing screen, her mind spinning with possibility. Inside, Adrian barked orders, his voice sharp with desperation. He didn't notice Sophia watching him, her eyes calculating, weighing her options. For the first time, she wondered if she had chosen the wrong side. If Adrian fell, he would drag her down with him. But if she turned against him, maybe she could crawl free from the wreckage. That night, when Adrian finally collapsed onto the bed, Sophia lay awake beside him, her mind racing. She traced the diamond necklace around her throat, but it felt less like a gift and more like a chain. The cracks in their alliance had begun to spread. And Sophia was already searching for her escape route. The chandelier sparkled above the grand ballroom of the Waldorf Astoria, scattering light across gowns worth fortunes and tuxedos tailored to perfection. It was the annual Winter Gala, the very stage where New York's elite paraded their wealth and whispered their scandals. Tonight, whispers buzzed louder than the violins, for the city's most powerful billionaire, Alexander Grant, was making an appearance. All eyes turned as the double doors swung open. Alexander stepped in first, commanding the room with his tall frame and effortless authority. But it was the woman on his arm who sent the ballroom into collective silence. Isabella Carter. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Forks clattered against plates, glasses stilled midair. Everyone had heard the story. The heiress lost at sea, the tragic wife mourned with crocodile tears by Adrian Cole. She had been declared legally dead. And yet here she was, alive, radiant, and breathtaking. Isabella's gown was black silk, sleek and sharp, clinging to her like armor. A diamond pendant rested at her throat, glinting with every step. Gone was the timid wife. In her place stood a queen resurrected. Her eyes, once dulled by betrayal, now gleamed with defiance. On her arm, Alexander moved with quiet pride, as though escorting not just a woman, but destiny itself. Whispers erupted. "It's impossible. She drowned." Adrian swore she was gone. Phones were lifted discreetly, photos snapping, the resurrection of Isabella Carter spreading across social media like wildfire. At the far end of the ballroom, Adrian froze mid-conversation, his champagne glass trembling in his hand. His face drained of color as his gaze locked on Isabella. Sophia, draped in scarlet silk at his side, nearly choked on her drink. The crowd parted, their stunned silence sharpening into tension. Isabella's steps were measured, deliberate. Each one carried the weight of survival, betrayal, and rebirth. She didn't waver. She didn't flinch. When she reached the center of the ballroom, she let her gaze sweep across the faces, allies, enemies, vultures, until finally her eyes landed on Adrian. For a moment, the room held its breath. Husband and wife, betrayer and survivor, the past colliding with the present in front of hundreds of witnesses. Adrian's lips parted, but no words came. His grip tightened on Sophia's arm until she winced, but Sophia's eyes darted nervously, already calculating her next move. Isabella didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence was louder than any accusation, her survival more damning than any evidence. The message was clear. Adrian's lies were unraveling. The wife he had tried to erase had returned, stronger than ever, with the most powerful man in the city by her side. The orchestra faltered, then picked up again. Violins trembling like the crowd's nerves. Isabella allowed herself the faintest smile, raising her chin. The ghost had returned, and the reckoning had begun. The ballroom pulsed with unease, every eye fixed on Isabella as she stood like a vision of defiance in the center of the crowd. Alexander remained at her side, his steady presence amplifying her power. Cameras clicked, phones recorded, whispers turned into gasps. Everyone knew history was about to be rewritten. Adrian forced a smile, though his hands trembled. He moved toward her, his voice dripping with false charm. "Darling," he said too loudly, "what a miracle. You survived. We all thought you were lost." Isabella's gaze sliced through him, cold and sharp. "Lost? No, Adrian. Not lost. Abandoned. Betrayed." Her voice carried across the ballroom, strong and unshaken. The whispers swelled. Sophia shifted uneasily behind Adrian, clutching her clutch so tightly her knuckles whitened. She tried to look composed, but the cracks in her mask were clear. Adrian reached for Isabella's hand as though to reclaim control, but she stepped back, her eyes burning with fury. "You stood on that yacht," she continued, her words echoing against marble walls, "and you pushed me into the sea. 7 months pregnant. You didn't just try to kill me, you tried to kill our child." The crowd erupted, horrified gasps filling the air. Adrian's mask slipped, panic flickering across his face. "She's lying," he barked, his voice rising. "She's hysterical. She's trying to ruin me." But Isabella raised her hand, silencing him. From her clutch, she pulled a sleek folder and handed it to Alexander, who opened it with deliberate calm. Inside were copies of bank transfers, shell company registrations, and the false death certificate bearing Isabella's name. Alexander's deep voice carried the evidence like a verdict. "Forgery, fraud, bribery, murder attempts," he read aloud. "Mr. Cole, your empire is built on crimes as rotten as your soul." The ballroom buzzed with scandal, powerful figures whispering as reporters scribbled notes. Cameras zoomed in, flashes igniting the air like lightning. Adrian lunged forward, his voice cracking. "This is fabricated. Lies. She's manipulating all of you." But Isabella did not flinch. She drew a small USB drive from her purse and held it high. "This contains emails between you and Sophia. Proof of your schemes. Proof of your affair. Proof of everything." Her voice hardened. "I kept silent once, Adrian. Never again." Sophia gasped, her face draining of color. You? You kept the emails?" she whispered, horror twisting her features. Adrian turned on her, his rage boiling over. "You idiot! You told me you deleted them." The crowd erupted, scandal igniting like wildfire. Phones captured every second, streaming live to a world hungry for the downfall of the powerful. Isabella stepped closer, her eyes unyielding. "The truth is out. You can no longer hide behind money, lies, or me. Tonight, Adrian, your empire crumbles." And with those words, she dropped the USB into Alexander's hand. The reckoning had officially begun. The morning after the gala, the city woke to headlines screaming Adrian Cole's name in bold, merciless print. Heiress returns from the dead, husband accused of fraud and attempted murder. News anchors replayed clips of Isabella's confrontation, her voice steady and damning, while analysts dissected every detail of the financial documents she had revealed. By noon, the stock market delivered its verdict. Shares of Cole Industries nosedived, wiping out billions in hours. Investors scrambled, board members resigned, and phones rang unanswered inside Adrian's skyscraper headquarters. The empire he once flaunted like a crown jewel now crumbled like ash in his hands. In his penthouse, Adrian hurled a glass against the wall, shards scattering across the marble. Sophia sat frozen on the sofa, her eyes glued to the TV as reporters spoke her name in connection with the scandal. "This can't be happening," she whispered, but her trembling hands betrayed the truth. "It's a smear campaign." Adrian shouted, pacing like a madman. "I'll sue every paper, every network. I'll bury her." But even as he spoke, his phone buzzed with news that cut deeper than glass. The SEC had launched an investigation. Federal prosecutors were reviewing the evidence. Subpoenas were being issued. For years, Adrian had played the system like a violin, bribing officials, silencing whistleblowers, manipulating markets. But Isabella's strike had been surgical. The evidence airtight, the timing flawless. And worse, it had been delivered in front of the world. No bribe could erase what had been broadcast to millions. That evening, as twilight bled into the skyline, black SUVs pulled up outside Cole Industries. Agents in dark suits marched through the glass doors, carrying boxes and warrants. Cameras swarmed the scene, reporters shouting questions that Adrian could no longer dodge. The images spread instantly. The titan of industry under siege. Inside the townhouse, Isabella watched the coverage with Alexander by her side. Her son slept peacefully in her arms, unaware of the storm raging outside. She stroked his tiny cheek, her eyes fixed on the screen. Each box carried out of Adrian's office felt like a stone lifted from her chest. Alexander glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "You've done it. The law has him now." But Isabella's gaze remained hard. "This is only the beginning. He tried to kill me, Alexander. Until he answers for that, I won't rest." Back at the penthouse, Sophia's patience snapped. "Adrian, we need to think of ourselves. I won't go to prison for you." Adrian turned on her, his voice venomous. "Don't you dare betray me." But Sophia's eyes told him the betrayal had already begun. The empire that once made him untouchable was collapsing brick by brick, ally by ally. And Adrian Cole was running out of places to hide. The penthouse, once a sanctuary of power, now felt like a prison closing in. Adrian stalked the living room, barking into his phone, while Sophia lingered near the window, her glass of wine untouched. Outside, cameras flashed from the street below, hungry vultures circling his downfall. "Freeze the accounts," Adrian barked. "Move the money offshore. I don't care how. Just do it." He ended the call and turned, his face twisted with rage. "They think they can break me. They're fools. I'll rebuild everything. I'll bury Isabella for good this time." Sophia flinched at his words. She had once admired his ambition, mistaking cruelty for strength. Now, stripped of glamour, Adrian looked less like a titan and more like a desperate man clawing at sand. "Adrian," she began cautiously, "maybe we should cooperate. If we cut a deal." He whirled on her, his eyes blazing. "A deal? You want me to grovel? To admit I'm guilty?" He stepped closer, his voice venomous. "Don't forget, Sophia, you're in this as deep as I am. Every transfer, every lie, your name is all over it." Her chest tightened. He was right. She had signed papers, fronted accounts, played the role of loyal accomplice. But as she looked at him now, pacing like a mad dog, she realized he would happily let her burn to save himself. That night, when Adrian finally collapsed into a restless sleep, Sophia crept into his study. Her hands shook as she rifled through drawers, pulling out flash drives, ledgers, hidden files. She copied everything, her heart pounding as though each keystroke were a gunshot. In her inbox waited the anonymous email she had ignored days earlier. "Help us, and save yourself." Now it felt like her only lifeline. By dawn, she was seated in a sleek office downtown, across from federal investigators. The weight of silence cracked inside her, spilling secrets she had once sworn to keep. She told them about the offshore accounts, the bribes disguised as consulting fees, the meetings where Adrian plotted Isabella's death. Her voice trembled, but with every confession, her chains loosened. Meanwhile, Adrian awoke to an empty bed and an emptier penthouse. His calls to Sophia went unanswered. By the time he discovered the missing files, it was too late. The betrayal was complete. That evening, the news broke again. Sophia Lane cooperates with authorities. Adrian Cole faces new charges. Clips of Sophia leaving a federal building flooded the airwaves. She looked pale, shaken, but alive. Reporters shouted her name as she slipped into a waiting car. The woman once draped in diamonds, now recast as a desperate survivor. Adrian roared with fury, smashing everything within reach. "She'll regret this," he shouted. But his voice was drowned by the echo of his empire collapsing. Sophia had chosen her escape route, and Adrian was left utterly alone, betrayed by the very woman he thought he controlled. The city that once bowed to Adrian Cole now watched with sharpened teeth. His face, once plastered on glossy magazine covers, now glared from every television screen beneath headlines of disgrace. Adrian Cole indicted, fraud, conspiracy, attempted murder. The man who had paraded his wealth and charm before cameras was now shackled in scandal, his empire nothing but rubble. It began at dawn. Black SUVs rolled up to his penthouse, lights flashing, agents spilling into the marble lobby. Neighbors leaned over balconies, phones recording as the once untouchable titan was dragged from his fortress. Adrian, unshaven and furious, shouted at the cameras, "This is a witch hunt! Lies! All of it!" His words echoed against the concrete, but the flashing cameras captured every vein in his neck, every bead of sweat. Reporters swarmed, their voices overlapping. "Did you push Isabella into the sea? What about the offshore accounts? Has Sophia betrayed you?" Adrian lunged against the agents restraining him, his rage boiling over. "She's lying," he roared, spittle flying. "They're all lying." But the world no longer believed him. Inside the courthouse, the gallery overflowed with journalists, socialites, and former allies eager to witness his destruction. Adrian entered in handcuffs, his tailored suit replaced by prison gray. He scanned the crowd, desperate for a sympathetic face, but found only glares, whispers, and cell phones raised to immortalize his shame. Then his eyes locked on Isabella. She sat in the front row, her posture regal, Alexander at her side, her son's photo tucked discreetly in her hand. Their gazes clashed, fire meeting ice. For a moment, Adrian faltered, the weight of her survival crushing him harder than the shackles on his wrists. The prosecutor read the charges, each word striking like a hammer. Wire fraud, money laundering, obstruction of justice, attempted murder. Sophia's name was spoken, her testimony presented, her betrayal carved into the record for all to hear. Adrian clenched his fists, his jaw tight, but he could not silence the truth. Outside, the public feasted on his downfall. Protesters waved signs. Former investors demanded justice. Social media erupted, memes mocking his fall from grace flooding every feed. The man who once towered over Wall Street was now a punchline, his power stripped, his arrogance exposed. As the judge ordered him remanded without bail, Adrian's rage boiled into desperation. He twisted in his restraints, shouting toward Isabella, "You think you've won? This isn't over. You'll regret this, Isabella." But her face remained calm, her eyes unwavering. She had seen him at his most powerful, his most cruel. Now she saw him broken, dragged down by his own sins. The gavel struck, the courtroom erupted. Adrian Cole, once a king of industry, was led away in chains. The tyrant had fallen, and the world cheered his ruin. Weeks after Adrian's arrest, the storm began to quiet. Headlines still buzzed with his trial, but for Isabella, life had shifted into a different rhythm, one no longer dictated by fear. The townhouse no longer felt like a hiding place. It felt like home. Each morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, painting golden stripes across the nursery walls. Isabella would rise early, lifting her son from his crib, pressing a kiss to his soft cheek. His laughter filled the house, a sound more precious than any fortune. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was living. Alexander became a constant presence, not as a savior, but as a partner. He carried groceries into the kitchen, read bedtime stories in a gentle baritone, and held the baby with surprising ease. Sometimes Isabella would pause, watching them together, her heart swelling at the sight of her son's tiny hand gripping Alexander's finger. One evening, as the city lights glittered outside, Isabella and Alexander sat together by the fire. Her son slept between them. Wrapped in a blanket Isabella had sewn herself. The flames crackled softly, a soundtrack to the unspoken peace settling over them. "You've changed everything for me," Isabella whispered, her voice almost shy. Alexander shook his head. "No, you changed everything for yourself. I just stood beside you." His gaze softened. "But Isabella, I want to keep standing beside you. For him, for you." Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with something warmer, trust. It had been so long since she allowed herself to lean on someone, to believe love could exist without cruelty attached. She looked into Alexander's eyes, seeing no ambition, no deceit, only sincerity. Slowly, she reached for his hand. "I don't want to walk alone anymore," she admitted. In that quiet moment, she felt the chains of her past loosen, replaced by the promise of a future she thought she'd never have. The weeks that followed were filled with small joys that built into something profound. Trips to the park where her son's laughter mingled with the sound of children playing. Quiet dinners where Alexander listened to her dreams of launching a fashion line again, encouraging her sketches like they were treasures. Evenings spent planning not revenge, but life, the kind Isabella had always deserved. She was no longer the ghost of a woman pushed into the sea. She was a mother, a partner, a survivor who had turned her pain into power. One night Alexander surprised her with a small velvet box. Inside wasn't an extravagant diamond, but a simple ring. Elegant, timeless, and meaningful. "Not because you need saving," he said softly, slipping it onto her finger, "but because you deserve to be loved, truly and completely." Tears filled Isabella's eyes as she whispered, "Yes." The storm had ended. A new dawn had begun. And Isabella Carter finally had the love and safety she had always longed for. The courthouse steps were crowded that morning, cameras flashing like lightning, reporters shouting questions that cut through the cool spring air. Adrian Cole's sentencing had drawn the city's attention like moths to a flame. Behind the chaos, Isabella stood tall, her baby in her arms, and Alexander steady at her side. She hadn't come for spectacle. She had come for closure. Inside, the courtroom was tense, every seat filled. Adrian entered in chains, his once polished image reduced to a bitter shell of arrogance. He tried to meet Isabella's gaze, but she no longer felt fear. Instead, she saw him for what he truly was: weak, small, undone by his own greed. The judge's gavel echoed like thunder. Adrian was sentenced to decades in prison, stripped of wealth, power, and reputation. As the bailiffs led him away, his shouts of denial faded into nothing. For Isabella, it wasn't triumph she felt, but release. The chapter of betrayal was over. Later, standing before the crowd of reporters, Isabella took a breath. She hadn't planned to speak, but the weight of her journey demanded it. Her voice rang clear, carried by microphones to millions. "There was a time," she began, "when I thought my story ended on that yacht. I thought betrayal had stolen everything, my dignity, my future, even my child's chance at life. But I stand here today with my son in my arms, alive, stronger, and unbroken. And I want every woman listening to know, no man, no betrayal, no storm can erase your worth." The crowd hushed, captivated. She continued, her tone both tender and fierce. "Adrian tried to bury me with lies, but the truth saved me. Sophia tried to replace me, but love rebuilt me. And when the world turned away, I chose to fight, not just for myself, but for my child. That is the legacy I leave him. Courage, resilience, and the knowledge that no one has the right to decide your ending but you." Applause erupted from the bystanders, a roar of solidarity echoing against the courthouse walls. Some women wiped tears from their others, raised their phones, broadcasting her words across the world. That evening, Isabella returned home. In the nursery, she laid her son gently in his crib, brushing a kiss across his forehead. Alexander wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and together they watched the baby drift into sleep, safe, loved, and free of the shadows of Adrian's cruelty. Isabella slipped the simple ring Alexander had given her onto her finger, the symbol of a new beginning. She whispered to herself, to her child, and to every woman who would ever hear her story, "I was pushed into the sea, but I rose again, and so can you." The storm had taken her to the edge of death, but it had also given her the strength to be reborn. And Isabella Carter's legacy would forever be a testament to survival, justice, and unshakable hope. So, my dear friends, that's where our story closes. If you're still here with me right now, it means something inside this journey touched you, maybe in a way you didn't expect. And isn't that the power of stories? They remind us of the truths we sometimes forget about ourselves. Isabella's journey wasn't just about betrayal and revenge. It was about rediscovering her worth, finding love that heals instead of wounds, and learning that even in the darkest storm, there's always light ahead. As Marcus Aurelius once said, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. What tried to destroy her became the very fire that rebuilt her. And isn't that true for us too? Life throws storms our way: betrayal, loss, heartbreak. We all carry scars, but those scars don't define our ending. They remind us that survival is possible, that hope can grow even in the ashes. Seneca wrote, "Difficulties strengthen the mind as labor does the body." Every pain we endure is a forge shaping us into someone stronger, wiser, and braver. So maybe this story is more than just Isabella's. Maybe it's a mirror for you, for me, for anyone who's ever felt broken and thought they couldn't rise again. The truth is, you can. You are stronger than you think. And like Isabella, you can turn your pain into power, your ending into a new beginning. If you felt something in your heart while watching, don't let it end here. Share this story with someone who needs hope. Like the video if you believe in resilience. And subscribe to our channel so together we can keep telling stories that heal, inspire, and remind us that no storm is the end. Because just like Isabella whispered, I was pushed into the sea, but I rose again, and so can you.